Good morning and happy Wednesday. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the comprehensive nature of salvation, that God is not simply waiting until we die to have a vibrant, ongoing relationship with us, which can lead to transformation and human flourishing. Talked about miracles and the purpose of the miracles in the New Testament around Christ, how they confirm who he is and his claims, and just reminded you that Jesus is bigger than any of your problems. Today, I want to talk for a second about meetings. If you're an adult, you've been to a bad meeting. But there's nothing quite like a bad faculty meeting. No offense to the professors out there, but I went to a faculty meeting, and it was an amazing experience. There was a discussion going on. I have no recollection of what was being discussed, but a motion was made and seconded about the discussion. Well, it was quickly pointed out that the motion was going to affect the faculty senate bylaws, which meant that the motion needed a 2/3 vote. So an amendment was made to the motion, and it was discussed a little bit, and then an amendment to the amendment was made, and it was being discussed when it was pointed out that the amendment to the amendment had not been seconded, which led to a debate and discussion at some length about whether or not you can have a discussion without having a second. And then the discussion went to whether or not you should amend the amendment or just vote down the first amendment and offer a new amendment. And then it was pointed out that some of the words that were in the amendment needed to be defined, and each time that a definition was agreed upon, there was a word in the definition that had to be defined. And so then that had to be, it just kept going. Every minute the meeting went on, we got further away from the point. And after like an hour and a half, the initial motion was tabled and the meeting was adjourned and everybody left. Now, I share that to say the letter to the Hebrews can feel a little bit like that faculty meeting. Now, let me be clear. Every amendment, every subpoint, every definition, and there's a lot of them. It's a complicated letter, right? It's written at another level, but every amendment is rich and good and worth thinking about. Very different than the faculty meeting. But this is a complicated argument. And today we're in a subpoint of a subpoint. But it's a question and it's worth asking. So I'll remind you, the letter to the Hebrews, I think, is a sermon written in the 60s. We don't know the author. It's written to Jewish audience, and it's written to a Jewish audience in crisis. And the big point is that Jesus is bigger than the crisis. The question, and it comes in chapter 2, and again, it's a timeout from the argument that is being advanced about Jesus, and the question that is asked is, how can we hope to escape if we neglect so great a salvation? How can you hope to escape if you neglect so great a salvation? The point here is that we are likely to lose our way, not through a radical 180-degree U-turn. I'm headed towards God, now I'm going to go a different direction. We're going to end up in the wrong place through neglect, through drift. And you could argue that this is a moment where drift can be happening. After all, we haven't had sort of normal church in a long time. Who knows when church feels normal again, if it ever does. So, look, your relationship with God ought to be a white-hot priority in your life. And I'm not worried, let me be clear, I'm not worried about the church. The Big C church will prevail, right? It's God's project. It's his responsibility. He has promised that the church is going to prevail, that the gates of hell cannot withstand against it. God's kingdom is coming. I have absolute confidence in that. That's not the question. By the way, G.K. Chesterton said 5 times the church was written off. 5 times the church went to the dogs. And each time it was the dog that died. So the church will be fine. The question is, how will we do? How will you do? And I want to set before you that the implication of this passage, this little side point that the writer of Hebrews is making, is we cannot neglect our relationship with Christ. It needs to be prioritized. And so what are you doing during COVID and sheltering in place and other things to cultivate a white-hot intensity in your relationship with God? That's the subpoint of the subpoint, but it's one worth making. It's a question worth asking. Ask it today.